When you think of the men who have been general managers of the National Hockey League's now 32 franchises, here's what I'm betting. I'm betting you don't think graduates of Harvard Law. I'm betting you don't think they tell their billionaire owners there's going to be two hands on the steering wheel here and they're both mine or I'm out of here. And I'm betting you don't think that they're world leaders in encouraging respect and acceptance of openly gay athletes. That's why tonight's guest is so different. Yes, Brian Burke was a Stanley Cup champion manager with the Anaheim Ducks. But as we suggested, he's so much more than that. And he chronicles it all in his new bio, co-authored with Stephen Brunt. It's called Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey, and it brings Brian Burke to our airwaves tonight from the provincial capital. Brian, it's good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. It's a pleasure. I would like to start in Minnesota, where you moved as a young kid, and I wonder whether you ever think about the fact that had you not moved there and therefore fallen in love with hockey, because it is such a hockey hotbed, how different your life might have turned out.
Yeah, I don't know. The fact of the matter is I fell in love with the game in Minnesota. We moved there when I was 12. I saw the state high school hockey tournament on television because we got stuck in a motel for a couple of days. And I fell in love with the game and I started playing that next year. And had I not moved there, I was a football and baseball player when I lived in Boston before I moved there. I probably would have stuck with those sports. As it was, I played football through high school in Minnesota. But hockey was my true love. And hockey has given me everything in my adult life. So I shudder to think what might have happened if I hadn't gone that route.
Well, you famously described the kinds of teams that you like to manage as pugnacious, with truculence and belligerence. And I wonder how well those adjectives describe you when you played the game.
Well, I wasn't a big fighter. If you look at my stats, you can't lie about stuff like that because players that you played with will call you out right away. So I wasn't a big fighter. I don't know how many times I fought that year, 6, 7, which is probably a big fighter in today's day and game. But back then, 6 or 7 fights were nothing. And so I wasn't a big fighter, but I fought some tough guys, and I was not afraid. I fought 4 teammates when I had to. So to me, I was a big hitter. I played 4 years of college hockey. You're not allowed to fight. I had 1 fight in 4 years and got kicked out for a game for it. So, but I played hard. I don't think I have to apologize to anyone for the way I played.
Do you know, incidentally, that you are one of 3 Brian Burkes who played organized hockey at a high level?
No, I did not know that.
You are. Yeah, there was one Brian Burke who coached at Mercyhurst College, and Brian Burke who played 4 years for the Notre Dame Hounds in Western Canada. So I guess you've never met those guys.
There was a Brian Burke that played. I'm trying to think. There was a Burke that played at Notre Dame. I think the same time University of Notre Dame, the same time that I played at Providence. I think there was a Brian Burke, but I met him once. And I know famously years ago, someone said in the media in Toronto that if my team made the playoffs, he would shine my shoes. And we made the playoffs. And he went on the radio and said, anyone named Brian Burke, come down to the studio and I'll shine your shoes. And 3 people showed up. One was Trevor Linden's barber, if you can believe it.
Huh.
One was some random guy who said, I want to thank Brian Burke. I always get the best table when I make a reservation. And then a 3rd random guy. So it's a Burke is not an uncommon Gaelic name, and Brian's not an uncommon Gaelic first name.
Right on. Does it bother you? I don't think you addressed this in the book, but you tried really hard to get as far as you could in hockey, and you had a decent university career in hockey, but you never did play 1 game in the NHL. Does that bug you?
It used to bug me. I think I have to focus on where I started and how far I got. So my 10th year of organized hockey. So for the average guy, he starts 5 or 6 years old. His 10th year of organized hockey, he's 16 and he's playing whatever. My 10th year of organized hockey, I was playing in the American Hockey League. So I focus more on how far I got and how fast I got there rather than that I came up short. So people have said to me, I've been teased about it. People say, oh, you never played in the show. And I'm like, yeah, and you've never played in the American Hockey League. And if you'd gone back and seen me play when I was first starting out and where I got to, I'm content. I paid for most of my college education with a scholarship, and I managed to turn pro with the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm content with what I accomplished in the game.
One of the singular influences in your life has been a guy by the name of Lou Lamoriello, who was your coach at Providence College when you played university hockey, and who still, at the age of 78, is managing a National Hockey League team, the Islanders. What, in your view, and of course he's a Stanley Cup champion as well, what, in your view, makes Lou so great?
Well, I think his commitment to excellence, like everything he does, he's a very intense guy. So everything he does is calculated toward being successful at something. So how you dress, how you act. Like when I played for him, it wasn't just about hockey. It was about turning a green kid from Minnesota like me into a man. And it was a lifestyle thing. It was a commitment to a way of life. And Lou impresses that on you right away, that everything we do here, whether it's New Jersey Devils or New York Islanders, Toronto Maple Leafs, is going to be with an eye toward having a parade. And that intensity wears off on you as a player. It infuses the team. As a player, you pick up on that right away, your practice habits, your game habits. So I think it's his intensity, his attention to detail. But he's, how old, 78? He'll be doing it. He'll be doing it until I carry him out of there.
And I was interested to read in the book that despite the fact that you've known each other for 4+ decades, you don't think you really know him well, and you wouldn't call yourself a close friend of his. Why not?
I think Lou builds a wall up around him that's family only. And trust me, his people skills are great. I love spending time with him. He's got a good sense of humor. He cares about your family. Like he asks, every time he calls me, he asks about my kids first. He was the first guy that tried to reach me on the phone the night my son passed away. So I go way back with Lou, and we are close as Lou gets to anyone. The impression I want people to understand is Lou doesn't truly get close to anyone outside of his family. So I don't know him as well as people I've known that long, but I know him better than most people do, and I owe him a lot. I respect him a lot.
Another huge influence in your life was Pat Quinn, originally from Hamilton, Ontario, who hired you to be his assistant general manager in Vancouver. He taught you that gentlemen wear French cuffs on their shirts. He was a big, tough Irishman, and there you are doing it, still modeling Pat Quinn. Well, that was the question, really. How much of Brian Burke is modeled after Pat Quinn?
Well, I hope a lot. I hope the good stuff that I learned from Pat. Pat was a great man and a great teacher and a very patient guy. And he was much more patient than I am. He's a better listener than I am. But he was fair. Right? Pat used the word fair all the time. He said, I don't owe you to make you rich. I don't owe you to give you a certain title. I owe you fairness. He was big on fairness to players, coaches, trainers, everyone. He wanted them to feel like they were being treated fairly. And I wanted to be Pat Quinn. I say that in the book. Like a lot of us did. A lot of young executives said, I want to be like Pat Quinn, this reputation for honesty and frankness and fairness. Clearly a towering intellect, law school graduate, and got his degree the hard way, like going part-time in between jobs and okay, I went to Harvard Law School. Everyone's impressed with that. I'm more impressed with my son, Patrick, who went to the New England School of Law, but went part-time and worked full-time for the Flyers while he got his law degree. I just took myself out of the workplace for 3 years. Pat chipped away at his and did it the hard way, so I respect that.
Let's talk about Gary Bettman, who you also have great praise for, the current commissioner of the NHL. He used to be the number 2 guy at the NBA, and apparently after meeting him for the first time, you said to him, you're a basketball guy, you're short, you're American. Good luck. Since then, despite how much richer and better the game has got under his leadership, he gets booed mercilessly every time he makes a public appearance. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's ignorant. I think every commissioner gets booed now. Like they boo Roger Goodell at the draft. They boo Adam Silver. They all get booed. And it's become fashionable because people are idiots. There are a lot of stupid people on the planet. And unfortunately, a lot of them go to some of our events. So the issue is Gary had a poor first impression. He got a real rough ride right out of the gate. People in the media in Canada went after him hard because they wanted a Canadian commissioner or president of the league, whatever. Gary came in and turned it into the commissioner's job. The fact of the matter is he's been a great friend of the game in Canada, and he's been just a godsend for the National Hockey League. You look at the growth of the league, you look at what we've accomplished as a league, you look at the charitable initiatives that we undertake as a league, and this is all Gary Bettman. His tenure has been spectacular, and so far in the pandemic, he's been spectacular again.
This is probably worth spending another minute on because when the Canadian dollar was trading at about 60 cents American, Bettman put in place a program that may have very well saved half the franchises in Canada. What was that about?
Well, he put together the Canadian Assistance Plan, the CAP, where the U.S. teams were writing us checks. So I was the GM in Vancouver in '98. The dollar was indeed at 60 cents. And Gary turned to the U.S. teams and said, we've got to keep the Canadian teams afloat. So I think we got a check for we lost $36 million a year before I got to Vancouver. The fiscal year that closed in June of 1998, we lost $36 million. And I got that loss to zero in about 4 years. But the Canadian assistance plan helped greatly, and it did probably keep one or two teams in Canada during that time.
I want to take you now to the time when you were the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. And again, we have basically a non-sports audience here that's probably watching this right now. So I'd like you, if you would, to explain to them what massive steps you undertook in order to be able to draft second and third, back-to-back, in order to get the Sedin twins, something that essentially is unprecedented in the history of the game.
Well, I never talk about the Sedins. First off, I want to mention Stephen Brunt, who tells his tale so wonderfully, who's my partner in the book, who did a great job. But the two guys that deserve the most credit for the Sedins are Thomas Gerdin, who was our Swedish scout at the time, and he believed in these kids long before I did. And then Mark Crawford, the coach that had them when they first came in and turned them into players. They deserve the heroes' worship here in terms of the deal. Thomas Gerdin came to me and said, we got these twins coming up. We've got to find a way to draft them both. And I said, what are you, smoking dope? No one's picked second and third or first and second or third and fourth in the draft. No one's ever done it. And so it was like, it's crazy. Then I saw them play at the World Juniors, and they weren't that good. The World Juniors that year were in Winnipeg, and the Twins finished second and third in scoring, but they got all their points against Bulgaria and Greece and countries like that, right? Against the U.S. and Canada, when it counted, they didn't do anything, and they got knocked down a lot. So I left the World Juniors. I told our scouts I'm trading the pick. We knew we were going to have a very high pick, and that breaks your heart because the scouts worked so hard for those 2 days. But I said I'm trading the pick. Then Thomas Gerdin called me. The Twins were picked to play in the World Championships, which is a men's tournament. Even to this day, kids do not go to that tournament, 18-year-olds, very rarely. And they were picked for the tournament. And he said, well, you come over to Oslo and watch them play. And I was not going to the World Championships that year, but I said, okay, I'll go. And I went over and watched them play. And you could see right out of the gate, their very first game, second and third shift, that twin thing. So you'd see an open patch of ice. Hank would throw the puck into this open patch of ice. There's no more than 20 feet of it. And Danny would skate right onto it. And you saw this connection they had. And that's where I said, we got to get him. And that's where the work started.
They were spectacular together, but here's the bigger question. Could you actually tell the two of them apart?
No, not the first. I can tell them apart now, but I need a good hard look at them. Like if they're 10 feet away and walking toward me, I can't tell them apart. They got to be like 6 feet away. And then I can tell them apart. But the first year, Danny Sedin got a cut in his upper lip. He got 6 stitches in his upper lip. And we were all ecstatic. We're like, yes, he's going to have a scar and we'll be able to tell him apart. And the scar faded almost immediately. So we were all disappointed.
Okay. Your first coach in Vancouver was Mike Keenan. And you guys, how do I put this? You did not exactly hit it off. And you said this to Mike after one game in which he did something highly unusual. And I'll read an excerpt from the book here as it's described. You said to him, if you ever pull a goalie again in the middle of a game other than on a delayed penalty, I'm going to come down to the bench to beat you within an inch of your life in front of the crowd and the players and everyone else. I'm going to throw you down the hallway. I'm going to coach the rest of the game myself, and I'm going to fire your ass as soon as it's over. How did Mike take that when you said that to him?
Well, I think Mike expected a pretty adverse reaction. So we were playing at Maple Leaf Gardens, and he pulled the goaltender in the first period. And Mike was trying to make a point. Pavel Bure was holding out, and Mike was trying to make a point to me. You got to make this trade. Get me some players I can use that we can win some of these games that we're losing. And I thought it was a very poor way to do it, but he certainly made his point on me. It was like he told the whole world, we need players. And if we have to play short, we have to pull the goalie to get enough players out there to win, I'm going to do it. It didn't happen after that. After that brief conversation I had with Mike about it, it never happened again.
Brian, I think it's fair to say that you have a very strong personal code, which is well known around the game. And you're not the kind of guy who, if a player comes in to share something deeply personal with you, you're not going to kiss and tell, and those stories are not in the book. But your really poor relationship with Keenan clearly did make the book. How come you wanted to put that in?
Well, the test for what went into the book, and I can say this frankly, You're right, Steve. The stuff, the intimate stuff between me and players, family stuff, family illnesses, marital issues, none of that's in the book, and none of it will ever be in the book. The test for what went in the book was this discord or this issue, whether it was with Pierre Maguire or Kevin Weeks or Mike Keenan, was it widely known around the team at the time? In other words, could you have heard this story, Steve, at a bar from one of my other players or from one of the other coaches? And the answer is yes. So there's nothing, not one story used in the book that teammates and coaching staff weren't widely aware of. So that was the test. I didn't air anyone's dirty laundry out here. I didn't throw anyone under the bus. I don't respect people that do that in books, but I did put in some story. To me, it's not typical for a GM to be feuding with his coach like that. It's not typical for players to be feuding among one another. It's not typical for the GM to be feuding with the owner. The most complex stories I put in there were me and ownership to show that here's what I told Stephen Brunt. I wanted people, well, first off, anyone who bought the book, I want you to enjoy it. Like, I would be sick to my stomach if I thought someone spent $25 on a book and didn't like it. So number one, I wanted it to be a good read that people would enjoy. But number two, and I think Stephen Brunt did this really well, I wanted people to feel like they were sitting in my office or sitting on the draft floor with me as I did the deal for the Sedins. And that's why there's so much detail in there. Like, every single detail of that trade is in there. And then I went back and showed it to Dave Nonis, who was my right-hand man at the time, my assistant GM, and said, is this accurate? I don't want to tell a story that's not accurate. I went back on all of these things where I could fact check with a contemporaneous, someone who was with me contemporaneously. I went back and checked it. So there's no stories in there that would expose someone to something that wasn't already widely known on that team.
No, mission accomplished on that front, clearly. And I have to say, for Brother Brunt, who was a regular back at this place for many, many years, he's really nailed your voice. I mean, he's captured your voice. And one thing we do have to say, Brian, you love the F-bomb. Any family members come up to you after reading this book and saying, like, Dad, could you tone it down a bit or anything like that?
No.
Because they know you.
No, it's how we talk in the industry. Like, okay, this probably cost me a lot of sales for a Christmas book for kids, right? You can't put this book under your tree for a kid. And there's too much profane language in it. But this is how we talk. And I remember reading Ken Dryden's first book, The Game, and he used the language that's used in the dressing room, which is profane and very, very salty. And every time I've gone eight times I've gone overseas to visit Canadian forces. Every time I do a military trip, that's how they talk. So in my mind, for it to be authentic, I actually took out probably 40 F-bombs. But this is how we talk in the game. This is how the conversation goes. You wouldn't say something to me that angered me, and I would say, my dear fellow, you must think of a different way to rephrase it. I'd say something that ends cough, right? Right. The second word rhymes with cough. So to me, I think it would lack authenticity, not just from Brian Burke, but from anyone working in management, because that's how we talk. Maybe I swear more than a lot of guys do, but everyone swears. And a player, if I said to a player, my dear fellow, we need more effort from you, he wouldn't even think I was talking to him. Like, unless I curse at a player, he doesn't think I'm serious.
Okay, I'm going to follow that up with this, because there was a time in the National Hockey League where if you wanted to chirp at another player or get under his skin, you'd use a homophobic slur. And that was standard operating procedure. Now, that's not allowed anymore. What do we infer from that?
Well, I think, first off, I just did an interview a half hour ago, and when I played, I used all those terms. You use multisyllabic terms to describe players. You're not making a judgment on their sexuality. You're not, when you call someone that famous 3-syllable word, you're not making a judgment that that player is homosexual. You're picking up the biggest rock you can in the fight and saying the lowest thing you can call him is this term. And it was perfectly acceptable back in the day. I did it. I'm embarrassed to say I did it. I used it as much as anybody else. I had to apologize to my late gay son for using that term, and I did. And so the league has said, no, that's no longer acceptable. You can get suspended for that now. Great development. So I suspended the first player suspended in NHL history for a racial slur back when I worked at the league. Now homophobic language has been added to that list. These are positive developments. But you want to yell at someone, you better think of a different vocabulary word than something that's homophobic.
Gotcha. I want to take you back 8.5 years to the last time you were on this program. You came into the studio back then, thankfully no COVID at the time, and you were working for the Toronto Maple Leafs and hopes were extremely high. And we talked about the mission that you were on. And here's a little snippet from that interview. Sheldon, if you would. If trading guys who are under difficult personal circumstances is the worst part of the job, what's the best part of the job?
Winning is the best part of the job. When you have a parade, you win it all. It's like climbing Everest in our profession. You got 30 GMs trying to do it. You got all these players trying to do it, and your group managed to climb to the peak and plant that flag, and there is nothing in your professional life that's going to touch it.
How much do you still think about the fact that you could have been as immortal as they come had you been able to have a parade in Ontario's capital city?
Yeah, first off, I wish I looked that young today as I did in that old. I mean, I didn't get the job done here. So the fact of the matter is, and I think accountability is vanishing in society. I think it's fashionable to blame other people. And when I got fired by the Leafs, I said, on a day in which accountability is fast vanishing in Canada, I intend to be accountable. I didn't win enough games. Now, the team got sold. That's why I got hooked in Vancouver. The inexplicable fire was Vancouver. My team had 100 points and I got fired. The team got sold. That's what happens. And the team got sold here, and I believe they were going to make a change no matter what. But if we'd been in first place, they could not have made a change. So I'm not going to cop out and say, oh, the team got sold. The fact of the matter is, had I won more games, I'd probably still have kept my job even when the team was sold. But it wasn't for lack of effort. It wasn't for lack of putting together a good staff. And I think finally, when I did get fired, that was a playoff team. And that team did make the playoffs with virtually unchanged from when I got fired. And I look at the team I left in Vancouver with minor changes, played in the finals a few years after I left. After I left Vancouver in 92, they played in the finals in 94. So I think I've had a positive impact on teams. I think I've made a number of good trades and draft picks and put them in a better position to succeed. But the fact of the matter is, in pro sports, you don't win, you get fired. I didn't win enough games in Toronto. I got fired.
Did you ever, in your view, get a satisfactory explanation from upper management in Toronto as to why you were fired from here?
Well, the only two reasons they gave me that day were they said that I didn't use the financial muscle of the Leafs to their maximum advantage. And that was those backdiving contracts and big signing bonuses. And I thought there were cap circumventions. So I said, no, I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't. And then second, they criticized the fact that I didn't get Roberto Luongo. But my efforts to get Roberto Luongo, the price tag was so steep that it didn't make any sense. So I said, okay, if today's a good day to make this change. If you think you're going to give me advice on player personnel decisions, it's a good time to move on.
Once the Leafs did get sold, they were owned by some pretty big corporate interests. And I wonder whether, you sort of touch on this in the book, you're a big, tough, gruff Irishman, and they weren't. Do you think that cultural clash explained part of your firing?
I think there was a lot that went into it. I don't think they liked my boardroom presence. I used some profanity in the boardroom. I don't think they like that. They're not used to that. And my view on that is you go suck your thumb as far as I'm concerned. That's how we talk. I think the profile was troubling. I think the gruff persona was troubling. They probably wanted a little quieter mess hall, and that's they're entitled to that. And again, these people that buy teams, they're entitled to have the people they want run them. So I came in, I replaced 5 different people, right? So I can't complain when I get replaced. I replaced 5 different GMs. I have an NHL record of being a GM of 5 teams. No one else has done that. It's a record nobody wants, but I have a record.
Brian, you talk about this in the book, and so let's go here now. I'm going to ask you to do something that's really, really difficult, and that's talk about the son of yours, who, as we sit here taping this, about a week from now, would have turned 32 years old. Instead, you lost him when he was 21 to a car accident. I'm talking, of course, about Brendan, who courageously came out to you and to the public. And I want to read just an excerpt of a letter that you publish in the book from another father. And the letter goes like this. Mr. Burke, he writes, I was driving my son back to university in Guelph, and suddenly he said, pull over here at this liquor store. I thought that was odd because my son doesn't drink. He said, Dad, I'm gay. The thought that went through my mind in that moment is, that if it's good enough for Brian Burke, it's good enough for me. So I said, no problem. You have no idea how you helped me with this. Brian, what's it like to get letters like that?
Well, there are fewer and farther between now. Right when this all happened, so Brendan came out, was very public, went on national television. He had the full support of our family and the hockey community, and then died not long afterwards, unfortunately, in a car accident in a blizzard. And I got thousands of letters like that. I'm not exaggerating. And then, right after the first few years, and then now I've left the Leafs, so I'm harder to find. But I still do get the odd letter, or even people stop me on the street sometimes and tell me, I never thought I'd get a chance to tell you personally, but my son came out, and the way you dealt with it so lovingly enabled me and my family to deal with it. So this is why, if you notice, I sleep out for Covenant House. And I don't do a lot of work on behalf of the homeless. I've got my own charities, and that's where I spend my time. But I sleep out on behalf of Covenant House because 40% of their youth members are LGBTQ kids that have been kicked out of their house. So to me, Brendan continues to affect lives, to affect decision-making, to influence families, to help young people that need to come out, and his work continues.
There almost surely are gay players in the National Hockey League. How far? There are. Okay. How far away do you think we are to the point where they would feel comfortable publicly acknowledging that?
Well, you know what? I will tell you this. My work with the LGBTQ community has taught me one thing, and people will say what you just said, but they phrase it differently, Steve, and they say comfortable coming out, or they say, when will someone have the courage to come out? And that infuriates me, because if you talk to people in the LGBTQ community, what stops people from coming out normally, not always, but many, many times, I'd say the vast preponderance of times, is a close family member whose approval they're worried about. So your dad might say, if it's a parent, that's number one. Dad says, I got no use for gay people. God didn't intend for there to be gay people. Gay people are going straight to hell. Well, it's real hard to come out to that parent. And if you do, you've got to take some stuff back as the parent. You've got to walk some stuff back, which is not easy to do when you've tried to rip your son or daughter's heart out. So that's number one. But if it's not a parent, your dad's brother, your aunt, your uncle, someone close to you, a sibling that just can't abide the thought of having a gay sibling. That's what prevents the coming out. It's not about courage. It's about, I don't want to disrupt and maybe tear apart my family. And that's the awful choice that these kids are left with sometimes. And it's sad and it's wrong. So to me, we have gay players. There's no question in my mind. There's 700 players in the NHL. You take the expert statistics, whether it's 3% on the low end or 7% on the high end, whatever it is, we've got gay players. And my message to them is, you will find a very welcoming environment if and when you decide it's appropriate for you to come out.
Now, you could have said that when you were managing a team. You're not managing a team anymore. Can you really make that commitment on behalf of the other GMs in the game today?
I'm going to jump so hard on anyone that doesn't toe that line that, yes, I can make that commitment. I'll make life miserable for anyone that doesn't toe that line.
Okay, understood. We've got a couple of minutes left here. I want to touch on two more things. We know that you like an aggressive brand of hockey. You like an aggressive, entertaining brand of hockey. I don't have to tell you, there's a lot of people who think that leads to the kinds of head injuries that ruin careers and ruin lives. Do you think the NHL has adequately addressed the issue of head injuries?
Yes, I will tell you this. I played with concussions. I played high school football with concussions. I played college hockey with concussions, and I played pro hockey with concussions. I played rugby afterwards with concussions. So I worry about CTE. I worry about all the things guys from my era have to worry about. What I can tell you is I had coaches put me back in with a concussion, but they asked me first if I felt okay. And certainly no one ever said, like Lou Lamoriello never let me play with a concussion knowing there were potential serious long-term effects down the road. The science caught up with the injury. We didn't know the injury. And so we got, I remember, Steve, this is God's truth. You know what the rule was? If you got knocked out playing college hockey, look at the scoreboard before the trainer gets out there. Because the trainer's going to ask you what the score is. who you're playing, what period it is. So you'll see guys on the ice holding their heads, roll over and look up at the scoreboard. Because the trainer, first thing to say is, who we playing? And you got to say, Northeastern. What's the score? We're up 2-1. What period? Second. So you rolled over and looked at the scoreboard so you could lie to the trainer and fool him and get back in the game. So you'd go back to the bench, you'd feel sick, coach would come down and say, can you go? You'd say, no. Coach would say, okay, someone else go for Brian. Then the coach would come down in the second shift, can you go? No. Okay, someone else go for Brian. Then third shift, yeah, I'm feeling okay. The fog is lifting, the ringing is stopped, I can play. Now, never once did the coach say to me, I know you're seriously injured, but I want you to play anyway. That didn't happen. We didn't know the injury. So I think the league has done a great job in catching up the science to the injury, to where training staffs and medical teams know the injury, know how to diagnose it, know how to treat it properly. I'll tell you a story. We had a player named Trevor Gillies who came up and played one game for me in Anaheim. And he got in a fight, and he said he felt fine, and we sent him back down the next day to Portland, Maine. He got to Portland, he was feeling the side effects of a concussion, including nausea, dizziness, light sensitivity. So we went to our coach, Kevin Deneen, and he said, I think I'm concussed. So Kevin called me, and he said he thinks he's concussed. I said, put him on a plane. We flew him back and paid him his NHL salary until he felt better, and the doctors cleared him to play. But that was Anaheim. That was 2007, not that long ago. And I look at how much we've learned about the injury and how we diagnose it and treat it now. We're doing a great job with it, in my mind. It's a full contact sport. We're going to have concussions.
That's a Brian Burke managed team, though, and you've already established the fact that you're a pretty progressive guy in the way you run your teams. You know that there are lots of other managers in the league who are not that progressive, and neither are their coaches, and they would have taken an exact opposite approach. What do we do about that?
Well, I think it's changed now. It's out of our hands, actually. The team doctor has the final say on whether a player goes back in or not. So the GM might want him to go back in. Maybe it's a must-win game. Maybe it's your best player. But he ain't getting off the pine unless the doctor says he can't. And I used to say to our doctors in Calgary and Hartford, going way back, Vancouver, here's the test, a guy coming back from an injury. If this were your son, would you allow him to return to play? That's the bar for me. And I think that's the bar the league has now, is there's spotters in the building. So even if a player says, I don't want to go get checked for a concussion, the spotter can make him go get checked. The team doctor can keep a player out of competition at any time. Even if the player says he wants to go in, even if the coach wants him back, doesn't matter. I think we've made great progress in that area.
Brian, let's finish up on this. Of all the people I've ever talked to, you definitely are the one who seems to care the least whether you are liked. And it's almost a badge of honor with you. Why do you think that is?
I think I learned this from Pat. My dad and mom taught me this too. Just if you're in the right, it's okay to be on an island if you're in the right. Even if you're standing completely alone, if you're in the right, it's okay to be on an island. And don't be popular, be right. Do the right thing, don't do the popular thing. So I came by it naturally from an early age. But it was distilled with Pat Quinn, because Pat truly, I remember one time I was really upset, something Tony Gallagher wrote. It's my first year in Vancouver, 87, 88. And Tony was hard on the team. And I went into Pat's office. He says, what's bugging you? And I said, this is Tony Gallagher. I'd like to beat the snot out of him. Pat said, sit down. And he said, this is going to eat at you. You can only care about what your family and close friends. He said, the group of people you care about, you should be able to count on your fingers and toes. And anyone that's not on that list, you don't care what they say. You don't care what they think. You don't care what they feel. You've got to become impervious to this. And that day, a light went off in my brain that day, whereas I said, I don't care. And I truly don't. And the examples in the book, Steve, I'm sure you saw it. My ex-wife used to go nuts because I'd speak publicly and someone would come up. Always. Every time I speak, someone comes up and goes, I have never liked you. I have never liked you. 20 years I've been watching on TV. I hate your guts, but I heard you speak today and I think you're an all right guy. Now there's a chance to make a friend, right? You just shake their hand and say thank you. What I say to them is, I didn't care what you thought yesterday, and I certainly don't care what you think today. It's so condescending to me, like, oh, I used to think you were a jerk, but now I like you. Get out of here.
Yeah, but you know Jennifer was right. You could just shake the guy's hand and say thanks.
Yeah, I could. It'd be too easy.
Brian Burke, you are nothing if not authentic. I got to give you that. And I got to tell you how much I just loved reading Burke's Law. Of course, the title taken from an old TV show that Gene Barry was in maybe 50 years ago. Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey. It has brought Brian Burke to our airwaves tonight. Great talking to you again, sir, and I hope we get to do it again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.